Welcome to the Root of Our Health podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth, a corporate burnout in the fashion world turned board certified health and wellness coach, functional medicine certified health coach, speaker, and an all-around health nut. This podcast was created to educate and inspire you to live a healthy life mentally, physically, and emotionally by using alternative methods for prevention and healing. With a combination of solo episodes along with highly trustworthy professional guests, we get to the root cause of health-related issues to arm you with knowledge and tips for your well-being so you can live a life full of vitality no matter your age. Are you ready? Here we go. Hello, Dr. McDaniel. How are you today? Thank you so much for joining the Root of Our Health podcast.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, and we were connected by your colleague or partner, or so to speak, John Lewis. He was on this podcast as a guest in the past. Now, you are a retired medical director. What made you get into studying the immune system and specifically oligosaccharides, if I'm saying that correctly, and glyconutrients?
Well, in 1985, a businessman from about 10 miles from here came to my office at Dallas Fort Worth Medical Center, where I was director of laboratories, and he wanted me to be a medical consultant for a company he was forming calling Carrington Laboratories. And he'd raised $20 million from investors with the goal to make a new drug from the active ingredient from aloe vera leaf gel. He had a small network marketing company called AvaCare, and in 84, 85, he had about 7 messages sent to him from individuals that said, I was on my deathbed waiting to die from this new disease of unknown cause and no treatment called immunodeficiency syndrome. And of course, that's called AIDS. And they said in these notes, I drank your aloe beverage, which he called a term that didn't tell you it was aloe. And they said, now I'm back at work and in school. Thought you'd want to know. Well, he came to me with that story, and I sat there with a straight face and all. But inside, I was so drug oriented from all my years that I was saying hogwash. Anyway, this must be a placebo effect or a hoax, because network marketing is full of hoax, people overstating things and spinning. And so it started as a middle of the road scientific endeavor with the Food and Drug Administration, that they had to go to try to find out what was in the aloe vera that was doing this business for these AIDS patients. And, it was just middle of the road science, and it's turned into actually virtually a spiritual journey, because time and time again over these 40 years, I've had to, as I learned more and more, the question came up, how did this come to be? And over again, how is this possible? And I actually, for about 2 years, I didn't believe what I was seeing and hearing, because I was so pharmaceutical drug oriented that you get through pre-med medical school and all. However, my father was killed in World War II, so I had to work my way through the university and medical school and residency, and in the summers, I had jobs on the side and sometimes while going to school, but I was an extern for Dow Chemical Company in Freeport, Texas, for 2 summers. And the importance of that is that they take at the Dow Chemical gases and also liquids, and under pressure and temperature and catalysts and rare earth metals to modify the reaction, they make different kinds of plastics. And I mean, from the type you can see through, and it's a thin film in the kitchen, to bowls and pitchers and glasses, and to even battery boxes on the side of trucks. So there's a wide range. Well, the significance of that is that every cell in the human body is a tiny microscopic little factory, and it makes products based on information that's in the DNA, and the DNA genes control how you take different nutrient molecules in cellular synthesis and hook them together to make bioactive compounds that run the biochemistry and physiology of life. And this is a very important thing that I don't know whether an individual understands exactly what I went through, but this is how our bodies actually work. And what you're doing, it's safe beyond compare. It's effective because it supports the engineering and design of life as is coded in our genes, 46 chromosomes that are in every cell. And it is economical beyond anything any health expert or a politician ever dreamed was possible. So that's how I got started.
Wow. So from an aloe drink, and it kind of shift your perspective in terms of how the body actually thinks, reacts, all of that. So that's amazing.
Well, this is the type of things I've learned over these years that you don't get in pre-med or medical school. You're oriented that if you got a physical, mental, or emotional problem, we've got a drug for it.
Yeah.
And it's not mentioned that the reason drugs work is they interfere with engineering and design of life to suppress symptoms. And the ideal drug, if you quit taking it, the symptoms will come back. Well, what we're involved in this more comprehensive nutrition is that the genes are programs for normal health. And one of the things that people I don't think get is that everybody knows what a blueprint to a house or structure is. Well, you can carry that blueprint around for ages, but until you bring in lumber, bricks, and cement, and concrete, and glass, and the things to build that house, you will not have anything over your head or around you. You'll just have a blueprint. Well, genes are like blueprints, and require that you have in your diet an inventory of nutrient molecules that can be hooked together to make these bioactive compounds that actually runs our different organ systems, like our immune system, which was that's how we started out, is that the goal was to find what is in the aloe vera leaf gel that would help these patients that have what we eventually found out was a retroviral infection. And the investors thought they would get filthy rich. Well, as I say, the founder of the company raised $20 million to try to do this. And we found out that the active in our team, I didn't do it personally, it was chemists, found out it was acetylated mannose, a acetylated sugar that for short terms, the International Naming Society calls it Acemannan.
Mm.
Actually, these 20 academic institutions were working on all the different phases of new drug development with Food and Drug Administration, or FDA. Well, in the early first phase is called toxicity phase, and they require you tell them of this substance you hope to make to be a drug. What is the LD50 and the LD100 for this substance? And that LD stands for lethal dose. In other words, they put you into a conference, and they decide that you will do experiments with, it can be mice, rats, dogs, cats, small animals, and how much does it take to kill half of them, and how much does it take to kill all of them? Because all drugs are poisons, according to Paracelsus, who was considered the father of Western pharmacology, and his most famous statement was, "All drugs are poisons." And it really should resonate very positively with the public that is so drug oriented. Well, this corrects the problem through the genes of why you have symptoms and changes in the substances in your body, the concentrations and the amounts. And one of our number one problem was we couldn't find anything we could kill. In routine studies, we didn't kill any mice, rats, cats, or dogs. And we had to even do extended studies to take higher doses for a longer period of time. We still didn't kill anything. And in fact, with these institutions, they gave 3,000 milligrams a day to undergraduate students at the University of Texas, no problems. And then they gave IV sterile injections into medical students, ever money hungry, excellent experimental animal. And we didn't kill any medical students, and they didn't have any toxicity. So this got our application thrown out of the FDA because it's heresy to have a drug that has no toxicity. Well, in a few years, we had all this data, and the company was very frustrated that this was a molecule that supported the health. And what we had found out is being focused on the AIDS virus, that not only was this a substance that was antiviral, but it was antibacterial, it was antifungus, and ultimately we had orphanages in Africa that had children with chronic malaria, with episodes of fevers and chills and red cell destruction. And I didn't know before that got involved that the World Health Organization has the data that the number one cause of death on planet Earth is chronic malaria. Well, these children quit having these symptoms. They begin to grow, get out of bed, go back to school. And ultimately, we were informed that they excelled in athletics, which was primarily what we call soccer and they call football. But they had energy and stamina and recovered from fatigue by adding this, in addition to the fact that it was antiviral. And we found out that this was different from any drug. The drugs interfere with the engineering and design of life, or the biochemistry of the little infectious agent, to kill it or cause problems with its proliferation. Whereas this active ingredient, Acemannan from the aloe plant, boosts the body's immunity and defense mechanisms, them to a level that they'd never seen before. And this did away with the problem of a drug resistant agent, because the body was, the white cells were more vigorous. And they had experiments from these academic institutions that you can take a bacteria and the white cells phagocytize it or take it inside of them, but it's still alive for maybe for an hour or more. However, with if you put into the tissue culture with the white cells, this agent from the aloe plant, almost immediately, within seconds, the cell kills the infectious agent inside that it's engulfed. And this is the type of thing that it just boosts the body's host defenses. And in the serum, most everybody has heard of antibodies that fight against infection. Well, there are a lot of other molecules that the body makes in the lymph nodes and in the liver that are host defense mechanisms. And all of these are increased in amounts, including the antibodies that the body makes to work against the infection. So we got kicked out of the FDA, and fortunately, the government passed the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994. Eureka! We have, and we realized, a ingredient under the new classification of a dietary supplement, because the academic institutions were able to show that 9 molecules of this aloe acemannan and cellular synthesis in the major big step, which is called the endoplasmic reticulum, that's part of cell synthesis, that they're hooked together to make a domain on the membrane. And get ready for this, on the membrane of all cells in all organs of the body.
Wow.
This is not a new idea. Dr. Hans Selye, who is credited as being the father of human physiology, calls this communication between cells and harmony and balance homeostasis.
Yeah.
Maybe you've heard of that term, homeostasis. Well, this molecule from the aloe plant is active in moving the metabolism of the cells to homeostasis. Well, in homeostasis, which I call good housekeeping stage of cell cycle, and when I say cell cycle, that may be something that kind of throws a fit, but we cycle as human beings. We start very young and we age and become adults, but we also every day we eat at certain times, we sleep at certain times, we go to the bathroom at certain times. So we cycle as human beings. Well, cells have cycles too. And in the S1 phase of the cell cycle, all the genes are turned on to move the ingredients in the cell to a normal amount or concentration, all the different molecules. Well, the important thing about homeostasis, when you get everything into this normal zone, you don't have deviations from normal health. And deviations from normal health for human communication form profiles of symptoms and different changes in the blood that you assay in the laboratory, form profiles that we call diseases and syndromes. And if you're in the normal zone, you don't have diseases and syndromes, and that's because the reason that this active ingredient from the aloe plant is so broad in its benefits to improve health. For example, the thyroid gland that makes thyroxine, if it's making too much or not enough, will get into the normal zone, which is the same type of thing for all the hormone organs in the body. And I have a chapter in a book that I'm writing about this whole thing, that human performance for neuromuscular activity, like for Olympic competition and World Cup and such, you can take a professional athlete and they're at their maximum performance, but you add this and they can go run faster, they can lift more. It improves their function because this supports maximal activity of the cells, because our body, everything that you and me talking to each other, you've got cells in your brain that are listening and interpreting and saying he's full of hogwash, or this is good information, and I'm recalling things from the past. But all of this is done with cells that are in our brain, And just like the athlete, it's the muscles and the nervous system going to the muscles. And so we have one of the largest files on my computer is how brain function is increased by adding this. And what we mean by that is that normal children will score higher, and we've got data from kindergarten up to college, even in minority students. They take this study while they're taking this added to their diet, they score higher. And children with ADD and ADHD, that's a deviation from normal. They get out special education class, and some of them have get back into regular class and become the smartest kid or fastest kid in the class because things are working better. And it's just a broad spectrum. Even type 2 diabetics, their sugar levels and the production, if they make some insulin, is improved to improve the life because the World Health Organization says that type 2 diabetes, primarily associated with overweight and obesity, is a silent worldwide epidemic. Well, we have wonderful events with that. But as I was telling you about these children doing so much better, including even Down syndrome, and we've got cerebral palsy children and adults that now can do things they had never done before. And we were really puzzled because that membrane domain for homeostasis really doesn't get into why these people, when the brain is getting better. And so eventually we were able to show that we make millions of adult stem cells because we have done particularly two studies. One was in Canada in children with fetal alcohol syndrome damage taken away from their mothers and put into foster homes. And they were not doing very well in special education, and there were behavior problems in school as home. And all of a sudden, they started improving. They had done IQ tests on them before the government had, and they were all less than 50 IQ, destined to be wards of the state for life. Well, after a while, some of these children, actually, it was 7 different families, the children began to behave and do what they not do what they're supposed to not do and do what they're supposed to do, do
Right.
better in school, and begin to make advances in their academics. So they repeated their IQs, and they were ranged from 80 to over 100. And some of these stories are just fantastic. Well, this I had been asked to come up there and explain how this was possible, and I looked at the ceiling and I says, "Lord, I'm going to go up there and make an absolute jackass out of myself in front of all these important people." Talking about this membrane domain for homeostasis, which is all we had. But in the Journal of the American Medical Association, they had a 1 page special article that had been published in another journal, which they almost never do. And in the middle of it, they had a photograph, which I'll mention here in a minute. But what the story behind the thing was that at Johns Hopkins Medical School and with the National Institutes of Health Neurological Institute, they had 4 females, XX chromosomes, 2X chromosomes, that had leukemia and failed all treatment, and they were destined to die. So they said, let's do an experimental thing and bring them in for reverse isolation and give them high dose chemo designed to kill all the cells in their bone marrow, all the malignant cells and the normal cells. Well, they're in bad shape with no bone marrow. So they got aspirations of bone marrow from only male donors.
Wow.
Males are XY chromosomes. And so this bone marrow took in them that went in their bones, and they got out of the hospital and they lived for a while, and lo and behold, the leukemia came back on them and they died, and they came to autopsy, and what was the picture in the middle of the page was under a UV light, and it showed that in the brains of these females were neurons that had Y chromosomes in them, like from the male donors. When I saw that, I knew what had happened up in Canada with the children with the low IQs that had increased. And with flow cytometry, which I won't go into what it is, but it tells you what kind of white cells you have in your peripheral blood, we were able to show that they were, by adding to the diet this active ingredient from the aloe, that you get millions of adult stem cells from your own bone marrow. Remember, the stem cells were donated to these leukemia patients. Well, these children were getting, they found out, our child formulations would have the Acemannan from the aloe plant in it. And the mechanism of action, we thought, was generation of these stem cells that migrated into the brain, and this improved their IQs and their behavior. Well, we had a lot of distributors that this company that I became the medical director for, and they were primarily baby boomers, and they had older parents, and they had parents that were beginning to be forgetful, and even some of them, they said, maybe early Alzheimer's. So they gave them this active ingredient formulation from the aloe, and they improved. Well, this was so remarkable that we eventually had a lady came in. I'd been wanting money for research. She had a $200,000 check from her husband, built rigs for oil and gas in the oil and gas industry in Texas. And he sold 4 of them, and he needed a tax write-off. And so he gave her a check for $200,000 and said, give this to somebody that we can write it off as taxes. Well, she handed me this check, and I was just staggered.
Wow.
It's like money from heaven, but there's a lot of responsibility, which you don't want to waste it. So I went to the medical school where I graduated from in medical school, and they were appalled because this was nutritional, and they were all interested in drugs, and they actually kicked me off the clinical faculty for even coming over and offering it.
Wow.
Well, over in Fort Worth, they had been a private medical school that when it opened up, it was osteopathic. They didn't have the money for the faculty, so I had been a teacher there for 2 years teaching pathology, and I thought, man, I got strokes here. So I went over there, and I felt like it was sort of a come down from the school I graduated from, but I was happy to get somebody to do it. Well, in the interim, where they had had all these old buildings when they first opened up, the Texas government had taken it over, built these beautiful brick buildings, and put in a faculty and all. And I was put in a room with 6 PhD pharmacologists. And so I started trying to tell them about what I've been telling you, and how I wanted to do, because this woman that gave me the $200,000 check said, we've had 5 family members die of Alzheimer's. We want to do some research in Alzheimer's. Well, they said they're not interested in doing any nutritional research, that all the recognition and advancement and the research funds that are available nationally are all with medicine. So there I had this check, and what didn't want to waste it. And I'm just in a little peripheral hospital. Well, I was invited to speak at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. And when I went down there, they had dedicated a big glass building, and the dean said, we want to be the premier medical school that evaluates Ayurvedic medicine from India, Oriental medicine from China and Japan, Kunandari medicine from Central and South America, and folk medicine from Africa. Find out what works, why it works, and integrate it into modern medicine practice. Aha, I finally had a place to take my $200,000. And that Dr. John Lewis that you mentioned that introduced us, I was giving him because he's a vegetarian and a bodybuilder. And he has these pictures and these uh, wards and statues of bodybuilding that he uses to show how good it can do to your body to be a vegetarian. And lo and behold, his boss is a vegan that's a marathoner. And he runs marathons to show how good you can operate on a vegetable diet.
Yep.
Well, before we leave this, if you're having any trouble cognating about what I'm talking about, the National Geographic Society, and I have it right here.
Yeah.
In
Yes.
the year 2000, issued 5 grants to an individual named Dan Buettner.
Yep.
And the Dan Buettner was commissioned with these grants to look for places where people have longevity and good health. And he found 9 of them. And they're very interesting. They're common denominators from all these. But the first one was the island of Sardinia, just west of Italy. And there was a PhD there studying the people up in the mountains. And he said they're living just like in Roman times. They don't have any electricity, they don't have any gasoline motors. If they do anything, they do it with their muscles for activity. They herd animals and they plant their own gardens and all, and they live to be independently into their 90s, good health, and over 100. And this was the first 2 common denominators of what Dan Buettner found in the different sites is that they had a primarily vegetable diet, not totally vegetable, but primary vegetables. Number 2, they had activity. They didn't have electricity. There were mostly isolated islands or peninsulas where French fried franchises hadn't come because they want a big population for the business. And they all had their own gardens. And over and over again, they lived in their 90s. And like one of these was Okinawa, they had a 116-year-old female there. And this was repeated over and over again. And in this book that I've got here that Dan Buettner has written, which he calls blue zones. And blue zones came from that researcher on Sardinia. He says, you cannot imagine how blue the skies are up in the mountains. And so they took this term to call all these places with longevity and good health as blue zones. And the reason I bring this up is twofold. One, we've been into the science for decades of why the blue zones exist. The formulation that I have developed over this time is called New Eden, and everything in it is plant-based. And there's about 14 things, and it's expensive because you'd have to buy about 5 or 10 different dietary supplements to be what this is. But I know more about the aloe powder that's in here with the Acemannan than anything else in it. And the new processing is such that all the molecules in the aloe plant that are used for the metabolism of the plant are in here. And it's probably over 2, even though it has one thing, aloe leaf gel powder, it's got over 250 different nutrients that utilize. And so that's just true for the other ingredients in here. There's about 5 of them that they're actually, even though they're 14 listed, they're probably several hundred different nutrients to add to the inventory of what your genes have to work with to synthesize these nutrients to make the compounds that run the biochemistry and the physiology of life. And one of the other things that is a common denominator that Dan Buettner really focuses on, it says the individual, and particularly if you're not going to go move to a isolated island or peninsula, you can add this to your diet and you can get some of the benefits that we're already seeing. And I'll get into a little more detail on that in a minute. But these stem cells migrate in and replace aged, damaged, poorly functioning cells. That's part of the normal physiology of the body. And the fact is, in our early years, up till we're probably 35 or 40, they say that this replacement of cells is so vigorous from stem cells from our own bone marrow that in ever about 7 years, there's not a cell in your body that was there before. We're still here, but that stem cells have migrated in and replaced aged, damaged cells. And this slows down as we age. But if you add the aloe acemannan to your diet, this process goes on, and for more and more years of these stem cells coming out of your bone marrow and replacing aged and damaged cells, which adds to you getting to be, say, 90, living independently, good memory and all. And eventually, we were able down at Miami to do a study with the Jewish health system. I might add that we went with Dr. Lewis to about 5 different healthcare systems that had Alzheimer's patients, and they turned us down because this wasn't a drug. But finally, the Miami Health System, which is the largest retirement center on the East Coast, and they have 150 beds just for Alzheimer's patients and an outpatient program too. And they were looked at as we, Dr. Lewis and I met with their research staff, and they were almost insulting with the idea of nutrition for these patients that were losing their memory and cognition. And one of them says, you don't mean to really think that this improved nutrition is going to take somebody that's mute and hadn't talked, and that we have to put food in their mouth, tell them to chew it, tell it to swallow it, that they're bed fast, we have to bathe them. You don't really think nutrition's going to help them, do you? And we said, well, we want to do this. And so they basically had the attitude, you got money, we got patience, we will take your money. Well, and after about 6 months, I was invited to lecture at the medical school on this new approach to health management. And the medical director, who had not said a word when we met with their team, uh, heard that I was in town. And he said that I will break my temple schedule uh, because this was right in the middle of Passover. And this was a Orthodox Jewish facility. If you think Christians hospitals kind of slow down at Christmas and Easter, you haven't seen anything until you've seen an Orthodox Jewish facility shut down for Passover. But he says, I will break my temple schedule and I want to meet with you and Dr. John Lewis. Well, he was a different person. He was up on the edge of his chair looking us right in the eye, and he said, we have done the first 6 patients. That shows you how interested they were in us. They were to do 30 some odd, and they'd only done 6. He said, we've done 6 patients. He says they have all improved their memory and cognition. And we sat there, and it's quiet. He says, I told you, they have all improved their memory and cognition. And we said, well, that's kind of what we expected from our pilot patients. And he says, we've done research in Alzheimer's patients for the big drug companies for potential drugs for 20 years. We have never seen improvement in memory and cognition. In fact, what the goal was, does this drug slow the progression of each? And it all failed. We have never seen improvement in memory and cognition in patients. He said one of them is an architect that his wife brought him when he was very early, and he was down in 2 years he hadn't spoken. We had to bathe him, dress him, put food in his mouth, tell him to swallow it. He says now he's up, going all over the facility. He goes to the cafeteria. He talks to all the employees. He talks to his family members, says his wife is absolutely ecstatic. She never thought she'd be able to communicate with him again. And he said, he remembers business deals from over 10 years ago in detail. What in the world is going on? And we basically said, well, everything, all the cells work better with more improved comprehensive nutrition. And that's just what we supplied. Well, at that time, we hadn't done the studies that we did with the fetal alcohol children in Canada, but we found out that in this study, which the medical school had required that we do a safety study with, say, the 30 patients. And we didn't have controls or anything and all, but we had to spend all our money on all these tests to try to show that there's no damage to the bone marrow, to the liver, the kidneys, etc. But in the flow cytometry and the tests that are done for the bone marrow in your blood, there were millions of adult stem cells in circulation. And we drew blood on the patients when they entered the study before they had anything, and then we drew blood when they exited from the study and froze it. And when the tests became available for what is called brain-derived neural growth factor, it increased even though it was diluted with the entire blood volume. So that meant that we not only showed that there was no toxicity, which the medical school wanted, but that we had a potential mechanism of action that these stem cells from the bone marrow circulated up to the brain, replaced either dead or poorly functioning cells, and then differentiated based on this brain-derived neural growth factor to make new neurons to improve memory and cognition. And I might add that we have since found out that adults and children with cerebral palsy, where there's usually a hypoxia damage that causes it, that they are doing neuromuscular activities and quality of life they never had done before because of this added stem cells and this neural growth factor differentiating and replacing cells in their brain that oxygen had caused them to die in cerebral palsy. But we've also seen it in children with gene defects like Down syndrome and fragile X in boys, where, there's the XY chromosome for males. Well, the mother has a defective X, and these boys have dementia. And actually, they're just incredible, some of the benefits that these circulating macrophage white cells differentiating will do this. And that's kind of the story of what we're doing.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
what I'm doing now is that in the year 2000, with a researcher in San Antonio, Texas, we published a paper of 260 people over 50 that, adding this to their diet, they reverse the objective biomarkers that are associated with the disabilities of aging.
Mm.
And these individuals, by adding what's in this formulation to their diet, instead of watching church or going to church. They watched it on television. Well, they went back to church because they could drive their cars and get their driver's license back. They went back to golf, tennis,
Right.
square dancing, other activities. And I am very hesitant maybe to tell you, but some of these older ones had given up sex relations in their marriage because it's a very complex psychophysiological activity. Well, they went back to this and they were the happiest people in this whole group.
I actually have a question on that, because typically my audience is women over 40 in, perimenopause, menopause, things like that. I was actually going to kind of correlate into how this helps. Obviously, aging is very, very important, and healthy aging is very important. How, in your study, people over 50, how many of them were women and how many of them were going through menopause, if you know that?
Well, I don't know that
Okay.
that was not one of the factors, but you punched a memory button. We had downlines of women over 40 that their skin had regeneration of the collagen and all, and their wrinkles went away in their face, and particularly in their neck and in their chin. And we had one downline that was kind of embarrassing to lecture to them all because all of them were talking about how their breasts had elevated on their chest wall because of the connective tissue being regenerated
Interesting.
to like when they were younger. And it's just incredible
Okay.
the benefits of more comprehensive nutrition supporting the engineering and design of life
Yeah.
that is there. And so I was talking about this group down in San Antonio that improved. One of them was a dentist from Wichita, Kansas, who was in his 70s, and he had been taking our dietary supplement for a number of years, and he had these benefits of reversing these objective biomarkers of aging, which I will say were developed by Tufts Medical School and Johns Hopkins for the federal government because after World War II, they realized people were living longer and getting Social Security benefits. And so they wanted some data on these individuals. What do we mean by grandpa or grandma's getting feeble? Well, they developed these biomarkers that they could, from year to year, tell digitally and in numbers how feeble you are, so to speak, or how
Yeah.
you're progressing in your aging. Well, these were reversed back to these people were returning to activities that they had given up 5, 10, 15 years before.
Yeah.
Well, this dentist was very active and all, and he was in that study. He says, so he called me up all excited that he'd had his telomeres measured. And
Mhm.
telomeres are caps on the end of the chromosomes that protect the DNA from damage. But the chromosomes are long when you're young, and as you age, they get shorter and shorter under natural getting older. And I might add that they now know that individuals that live into their 90s and 100 have long telomeres
Nice.
in those families. Families that habitually the different members will die between 55 and 70 from chronic disease
Yeah.
have short telomeres.
Yeah.
Animals with long lifetimes have long telomeres. Animals with short lives have short telomeres. Well, by adding the active ingredient from the aloe to your diet, your telomeres are enlarged. And I'm sitting here talking to you.
Oh,
This dentist was so excited because his telomeres were that from about a 40 to 50-year old, even though he was 70.
nice.
Well, this kind of stirred in my mind, and I've been taking the active ingredient from the aloe since 1985, off and on. So I had my telomeres done when I was 75. And
How old are you now, if I may ask?
pardon me,
How old are you now?
88.
Oh, all right. Go ahead. Awesome.
Anyway, At 75, my telomeres were that for a 30 to 40-year-old.
Wow.
The next thing we discovered is like Dr. John Lewis, that you know, he is head of a exercise building in this building and all, and he really is into uh, periodic exercise every week, and his telomeres are long.
Yeah.
Well, uh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I had a woman, 72 years old in Arizona, that sent her blood in for telomeres.
Uh-huh.
It came back 10 to 20 years old.
Wow.
My
Wow.
first thought was,
That's,
trial error.
yeah.
I checked with the laboratory in Houston about their controls and their standards and all of this batch. They're all on target and all. That's the value. So with great trepidation, I
No,
called this lady up at 72 to tell her that her telomeres are 10 to 20-year-old. And she said, well, I'm not surprised. I swim 3 miles 3 times a week,
there you go.
exercise.
Yeah.
So I have a individual in California that's a male, and he's 57 at the time this was done,
Okay.
and he's a little bit crazy. He does triathlons.
Mhm.
He's even done the Ironman in Hawaii, and he does about three triathlons a year. But his keeping in shape is that he does 2 miles on a bicycle one week, and then the next week he runs a half marathon. Then the next week, 2 miles on a bicycle, and that's his schedule for
Yeah.
exercise.
Yeah.
57, and yet his telomeres are that of a 10 to 15-year-old.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So yeah, no, these are just amazing stories and obviously good testament, right, to the aloe and what you have in your supplement. So if you can you let everybody know where they can buy or where they can get the supplement so that obviously we all want longer telomeres and to live a long life, right?
Well, you bring up an interesting subject. Even Plato in ancient Greece wrote a thing on longevity. And of course, the Bible extols these ancient ones that lived into their hundreds. But there's been a search for the fountain of youth. And fact is, they say Ponte de Leon was all over Florida looking for the fountain of youth here in North America. Well, the fountain of youth is really between your ears about deciding what you will eat, how much you will eat, and having exercise and following this plan that the National Geographic Society is trying to get across to people. That I might add that they've had 2 segments in their journal on this. I get on my emails twice a week something about the blue zones,
Yeah.
and they have a Netflix segment on this research.
Okay.
And,
Yeah,
they
I
have
see
their
that.
own TV station, so they're trying to tell people
Yeah.
exactly what I'm telling you.
Right.
And as I point out, we've been in the research for 40 years of why those blue zones even exist.
Of course, of
And,
course. So yeah,
they
so if you can just, I'm sorry, if you could just like, let everybody know so we can, where they can get it. Is it on your website? If it's on your website, can definitely link it up to the show notes so we can obviously get more of it. So is that where it's at?
I will tell you how to order it on the web.
Okay.
But I'm really here to tell you to try to increase the thirst or the desire of people to want to change.
Yes.
And you don't have to move to an isolated island or a peninsula if you add this to your diet, and particularly if you'll add some exercise to it too, which is synergistic. But our website is www Wellness Quest, WLLNESSQUEST .org.
Perfect.
And there are 2 ways there that you can get a 20% discount. And one of them is with your credit card is automatic monthly order. And we throw in a container of bifidobacteria, which are the friendly bacteria in the gut that contributes to good health. And we figure trying to get across the importance of a diet is more important than trying to tell them that there's worldwide research going on
100%.
that will make it to the common public knowledge that the bacteria in our gut is very important. And I was able to accept this because I had read an article from Belgium that the soybeans are just an absolute warehouse of nutrients.
Yes.
In nature, a sugar is hooked onto the end of all these nutrients to make them water insoluble so that bacteria and fungus and all can't consume it. And that in the bowel, the bacteria knock this sugar off to make it water soluble, and it can be absorbed into the serum that's been circulating into the blood vessels that in the wall of the bowel, and you can get the nutrients for your cells. Well, there's worldwide research that these bifidobacteria that we give you a free bottle of is a contributor to better health.
Awesome.
So that, again, I'll say that's www.wellnessquest.org.
Awesome.
Be sure and note that they're 20% discount there twice.
Yeah.
This is the pathway to follow. Fact is, Aristotle of ancient Greece is quoted on quotations that have been translated that the pathway to safer health is through nutrition and exercise.
All right.
And we're validating that with modern scientific methods.
Yes, 100%. Nutrition and exercise, obviously also mental health, all of it. It definitely is very important. Dr. McDaniel, it has just been a super pleasure. I didn't have to say a word, but you literally have a long, long history and a wealth of knowledge, especially in this space. So thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot. And all of the studies and everything else that has gone along with your research, it has just been it's just been, very eye opening. And, maybe we could do a part 2 down the road. I do have a little bit more questions, but unfortunately, due to time, couldn't do it today. But yes, would love, if there's do you have any research articles that you can send? We can, obviously talk about this off, but if there's any research, links or anything, I can definitely put that in the show notes as well.
You hit my memory button.
Oh, yeah.
In my hand.
There
3 papers from other countries, 2 of them from China,
Okay.
that validate independent validation of everything that I've told you.
Okay.
And we've even gone further. And 2 of these papers are how this Acemannan works in the cells, that they destroy malignant cells or cancer cells and leave normal cells alone. There's 2 papers in here, and this from foreign countries validating everything that I've been telling you.
Awesome. We'll definitely put that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Dr. McDaniel, and to my audience, you are worth it. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.